Good morning. It's lovely how when the seasons change, you have new things to contend with while running. Now the landscapers are out all around the neighborhood, so there'll be lots of noise in the background and watching out for riding mowers as you're going down the streets. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about strategy, or a lack thereof, which I had in the first race that I ever ran. There's a 10K race on Long Island, New York, called the Great Cow Harbor 10K, and it's a pretty popular race. It's been going on for a long time. I'd have to look up when it actually started, but the first time I ran it was in 2021, and that was the first race that I ever did. I started running in 2019, towards the end of 2019, but didn't really start running for real until 2020. And then 2021, I put in some serious miles. So that was a race about midway through 2021. So I'd done a decent amount of running, but with the pandemic in 2020, there was no races that year. So that was the first time I was able to actually get on the start line for a race, was in 2021. One of the things that my dad told me in the past that's I think a good saying is prior planning to prevent piss poor performance. And I did not plan appropriately for that race. Raise your hand if you've done this before. You have a great training block, feel really good the day of the race, get up to that start line, they do the national anthem, the elite runners go out, you're going right behind them, feeling strong, you completely forget about pacing, go out feeling great, and completely blow up your race. That's basically what happened to me at that Cow Harbor race. So I gotta raise my hand because that happened to me. Look at this. This tree will look pretty. Cherry blossoms look good for like a week and then they fall all over the lawn, but they're pretty while they last. So went out way too hard in that race. About the prior planning part, Cow Harbor is actually a really hilly race, and I didn't research the course at all. At the time, I wanted to go out and try and run like a 7-minute average pace. I thought I could do that for the 10K. So that was my goal, but I went out and ran that first mile. I'm gonna go back and look at the exact numbers when I get home, but I think I ran it in like a 6:30 or 6:26 or something like that. So I went out way ahead of the pace I was planning to run. And then right after the first mile, you meet this gigantic hill with a really steep grade that goes on for a while. And I did not know that that hill was there. I didn't really pay attention to the course. I was like, it's a 10K. So I didn't know that like half of that 10K is going uphill. So I go up to that first hill after running so hard that first mile and tried to keep the same pace. I was, busting it up the hill like as hard as I could. And at this point, my heart rate, shot to the ceiling because I'm running so fast, and now I'm running up this big hill, and my heart rate got into the 180s almost instantly, which is, zone 5 for me, like the danger zone. Can't go much higher than that. And that's just not sustainable. So ended up slowing down in the later miles 4 and 5. I completely was spent. I had nothing left, and they were in the 7s. I'll get the exact number. I think there was like a 7:20, a 7:30 something in there, and I just had nothing left. Then I was able to turn it up again at the finish line. You finish in the town and you're going through kind of like a chute with a bunch of spectators, so it's a pretty cool finish. But I actually ended up going about my goal time, but I did it in the hardest way possible. So we'll take a look at the graph of that race, what I did that day. And then when I ran it again in 2022, I had a plan. I knew what to expect from the course, and I did a much better job. When I ran it in 2022, I controlled myself that first mile. It's mostly downhill, so I kind of just let myself go with the flow, like what it felt comfortable but easy on that first mile, knowing I was going to run into that giant hill. Then I intentionally backed it off in the second mile and took that hill much more leisurely, kept my heart rate down, and my plan in this race was to try and run some negative splits, and that's pretty much exactly what I did. On the back end of the course, I was able to go faster, and I actually ran mile 6, the fastest mile of the whole race, because I had saved myself, scouted out the course, planned properly, and I believe I shaved a minute and change off my time. I'll have to see the exact number. I think it was like a minute and 20 seconds or something like that. But if you look at the graph, of my speeds, it was much more even splits the whole way. Ended up going faster at the end, and my heart rate was in control the whole time. So that was just something where you live and you learn. Having run that course before, I knew what to expect the second time. I was able to control myself at the beginning of the race, didn't go out too hard, and got much better results. I wanted to do this video today just to kind of talk about strategy and how you can learn from my mistakes with this race. And I think it was pretty cool because I have, the stats on the race from one year to the next, so I can really show you, what I did differently and how it worked better for me. One of the biggest things when you're running a race is to try to control what you can control. There's certain things that you can't control. You can't control what the weather's going to be like that day. If you wake up and you're not feeling well, certain things like that. But what some of the things you can control is, the preparation that you do for the race. And one of the most important things there is scouting out the course, learning what kind of race you're going to be running. Is it a hilly course? Is it a mostly flat course? And that was something in the first year when I did this, I really did not do, and that really kind of bit me. As I said earlier, this was the first race that I actually ran, and I wanted to do, I knew I could do around 7-minute mile pace. So that's one thing I wanted to try and do it in that time. So I ended up, it's funny because I did kind of hit my goal, but it made it a miserable day for me. So you can see, I'll put up on the screen here, I ended up with a 7:01 average pace. Did it in 44 minutes and 2 seconds. And this is the part that's bad. My average heart rate was 183. My average heart rate was 183, but my max heart rate actually got up to 194. And if you look at the graph here, you can see it got up to 180 almost instantly and then stayed above that pretty much the entire race. Threshold for me is in the 170. So once I get like over 175, 177, that's me really pushing at like my absolute max. And you really can't sustain that for an extended period of time. You're going anaerobic, you've stopped using your aerobic system, and you can really only do that for like a half hour tops. It depends on the person, but in this case I basically immediately redlined my heart rate and then tried to hold it, which you just can't do, especially on a hilly course. Second chart here, you can see everything is red on this, and 76.5% of the time my heart rate was in zone 5. So that is not something that you should be doing in a race. And I think this picture is really the most telling thing from this entire race. You can see I went out that first mile at 6:26. Again, it's downhill, negative 98 feet there. So my heart rate was 169. That's okay. But now I ran into that giant hill and I still ran a sub 7 up the hill. My heart rate got up to 183, and then if you look there, it just stays in the 180s the entire rest of the race. Gets up to 185, and then it closed with 189 when I went to the finish. But if you look at my splits there, I had that first fast one, then slower, 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 drop off the cliff, and then I was able to, run to the finish with what I had left. But really going out that fast in the first 2 miles just ruined me for the rest of the race. And those last miles, I literally had nothing left. People were passing me the whole time. It was very discouraging. So now let's look at year 2 when I actually did this correctly. Knew what I was up against, planned for the course, ran that first mile and second mile a little bit slower, and was able to finish strong. So here I averaged a 6:48 pace. My heart rate average was 174, so 10 beats lower than it was in the previous year. My average heart rate was 174, but my max heart rate this time got up to 184. So rather than staying in the 180s the whole time, I just kind of ticked over that at the end, when I was sprinting to the finish. This time I spent 89% of the race in zone 4 and just crossed over to zone 5 a little bit at the end. So I did a much better job of regulating my heart rate this time. My fastest split during this race was actually faster as well at 5:19. But this is my favorite part of the whole thing. Look how much nicer this graph looks. So a little bit slower that first mile, slowed down in the second mile, and then just went faster after that. It's almost level, but did a 6:39, then a 7:22. I'm only up to 173 heart rate instead of 184. And stayed in the 170s the entire time. And then you can see on the back end here, mile 4, 6:38, mile 6 was 6:37. So that was actually the fastest mile of the race, was the last mile that I ran, and then I had that really fast sprint finish at the end. So this is a race run by someone who learned their lesson, learned the course, and did a much better job of executing. I am going to run this race again this year, and I'm going to see if I can get under 42 minutes this time. That's going to be a tough goal to achieve, but I've got another year of training behind me. We'll see how I'm feeling on the day, but now, I've run this course twice. I know what to expect. I have my strategy. I'm going to control what I can control. So that's just my kind of tip for the day. Make sure that you prepare for a race and control everything that you can control leading up to the start line. So I'd like to hear in the comments if anybody had an experience similar to me where you went out there for a race and just got too excited that first mile and went out there and threw your plan out the window. So I know I'm not the only one, but now we've learned from our mistakes, and I'm not going to do that again, I hope. I'll see you in the next video.